Good morning. Today I'm going to be reviewing my Rolex Oyster Perpetual 41, reference 124300. I purchased this watch from kramerwatches.nl and I want to highly recommend Kramer Watches to you for their outstanding customer service and a thoroughly satisfying buying experience. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So this Oyster Perpetual 41 comes protected by a white cardboard outer sleeve, which one removes from the outer watch box, and this is the outer cardboard watch box itself, which is magnolia, and it has the Rolex coronet embossed on the lid, which is very aesthetically pleasing. So one removes the lid to the outer watch box and pulls down the flap, as you can see, and then removes the inner watch box itself. Now firstly, I want to give due criticism to Rolex for using a poor quality watch box. Yes, it is well executed and finished to a good standard, as one would expect with a high tier piece. But however, I consider this vinyl plastic that they're using on their watch boxes to be abhorrent. Really, with a high tier piece, one would expect to see a solid wooden watch box which is lacquered, like the Omega Seamaster watch box, or alternatively a solid wooden watch box coated in genuine leather rather than this leather effect vinyl plastic. Really, the use of green vinyl plastic on a watch box gives it a cheap feel rather than a luxurious feel that one would expect with a high tier piece. But having said that, it does have an aesthetically pleasing gold coronet on the lid, which is nice to look at. So the lid to the watch box is hinged, as you can see, and inside the watch box is fully upholstered to a high standard using this velour fabric. So yes, it is well finished, but I just think there is room for improvement. With regards to the other items one gets with the piece, one gets this plastic bezel protector, and one also gets this plastic superlative certified chronometer tag, which has a Rolex hologram. As you can see, it changes colour in the light. So this confirms that the movement used in the piece, which is the caliber 3230, is officially certified as a superlative chronometer, both by COSC and also by Rolex themselves. And on the reverse, it has Rolex SA Geneva and the gold coronet embossed. So inside the watch box, there is a flap one pulls down, and there is a compartment to store this leather wallet, which has Rolex and the gold coronet, very aesthetically pleasing on the front. It has a booklet with a worldwide service guarantee manual, and on the reverse it has the new microchipped warranty card. Now I'm pleased to report that this Oyster Perpetual 41 is covered by a 5-year international warranty, which is very reassuring. And one also gets an owner's instruction manual, as you can see, which details the Oyster Perpetual and also the Oyster Perpetual date. So a very useful read if you're unfamiliar with the caliber 3230 movement used in the Oyster Perpetual. So that's the watch box. The watch itself sits on a padded pillow cushion, as one would expect, and that is upholstered with a velour fabric to a high standard, as one would expect. So I would say that this is a disappointing watch box overall, and there is room for improvement, although that is what Rolex is currently using. Now, with regards to the specification of this Oyster Perpetual 41, reference 124300, although it's called the Oyster Perpetual 41, it doesn't actually have a 41mm case diameter, as one would expect. The case diameter is 39.5mm. It has a 47.3mm lug-to-lug measurement, and it has a thickness of 11.6mm. The lug width is 21mm, and the Oyster bracelet tapers from 21mm at the lugs down to 15.5mm at the clasp. The heft of the piece is 137 grams, so it's a very comfortable piece to wear, bearing in mind that it's a 39.5mm. Really, I consider watches that are 39 to 40mm, they should weigh under 150 grams to be comfortable to be worn for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. So at 137 grams with all the links included in the Oyster bracelet, it is a very comfortable piece. And that also further enhances the low profile dimension of the watch. It's only 11.6mm, so it's actually a slim low profile piece. It has a 5-year international warranty, as I've discussed, and it also benefits from having a 10-year service interval. One of the enhancements that Rolex made when they developed the caliber 3235 and caliber 3230, which is used in this piece, is they created a new high performance lubricant, and that high performance lubricant extends the service interval of Rolex movements from 5-year intervals to 10 years respectively, so that's a notable enhancement. So this piece has a 70-hour power reserve, and as you can see, the applied indices are symmetrical, and I really like the use of double indices at the 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock position. One of my favourite aspects of this piece is the use of a blue sunburst dial. Rolex call this dial the bright blue version, and I absolutely love the way the dial changes from a dark navy blue to a more electric blue with a sunburst finish. Clearly legible due to the absence of a date complication at 3 o'clock and also the use of those silver applied indices. I also like the use of the baton hands, which beautifully complement the applied indices, and another favourite aspect is the applied coronet in silver at the 12 o'clock position. So I like the fact the dial isn't over branded with specification or text. It simply says Rolex Oyster Perpetual at 12 o'clock and officially certified superlative chronometer at the 6 o'clock position. There's no unnecessary information, the dial is clean, it's uncluttered, and I really like the legibility of it. Another thing I like about it is the lip of the flat sapphire crystal, which projects above the curved profile bezel. On the Rolex Explorer, it has a flat profile to the bezel, and I actually prefer the curved dome shape to the bezel used on the Oyster Perpetual 41. The dial looks larger as a result, and it is very well proportioned, with the lugs tapering down to the 21mm lug width. With regards to proportions, I think they have got the proportions of the case done to perfection. To have a 39.5mm case tapering down to 21mm lug width perfectly balances the Oyster bracelet with the head of the piece. Something I disliked about the previous version of the Oyster Perpetual, the 39mm, was that the bracelet was 20mm, and I think that the 39mm case with a 20mm lug width didn't balance as well. With 21mm tapering down to 15.5mm, the bracelet has a very aesthetically pleasing taper. Now, with regards to the clasp, I really like the fact that the coronet is engraved rather than being embossed, as is the case with the flip lock and also the glide lock clasp. It actually is lower profile, and it means that the lack of the coronets being embossed, projecting proud, means that it doesn't scuff desktops and tables, and I actually find it to be more comfortable really on the wrist, because it's just lower profile, having the coronet recessed because it's engraved rather than embossed. I also like the fact it doesn't have a flip lock which folds back. As you can see, it has a trigger action. One thing I dislike about glide lock clasps is the flip lock folds back on itself, and it scuffs the end link in the Oyster bracelet, and that's very irritating to see that mark appear on the end link of the Oyster bracelet. With this trigger action of the clasp, there isn't that flip lock mechanism, so as you can see, it doesn't fold back on itself, and therefore one isn't going to scuff the end link of the bracelet. The interior is beautifully, flawlessly finished, as you can see, with mirror polishing and Rolex engraved. So very nicely executed clasp, and I like the fact that it also has a 5mm EasyLink extension, which is deployed, as you can see. Now, minor criticism of this piece is that with all the links included, which is 12 links, 7 links on the 12 o'clock side and 5 links on the 6 o'clock side, it doesn't fit my 8-inch wrist, and I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see that. And really I think it's disappointing that Rolex don't make their watches to fit up to an 8-inch wrist. As you can see, I can close the clasp and it does fit my wrist very well, but it's too tight. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I like to size my watches loose, and I like to size them correctly, and the correct method of sizing a bracelet is one should always be able to slide an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times, and the purpose for that index finger thickness is to allow for wrist expansion when one's wrist expands in warm weather, or alternatively when one is active, such as playing sports. So that is the correct sizing method for bracelets, an index finger under the clasp at all times. Now, this doesn't have a glide lock, it just has that 5mm EasyLink extension, which does suffice to extend the bracelet when one is in warmer weather. But however, I would prefer to see Rolex include an extra 1 to 2 links in the Oyster bracelet to allow for collectors with an 8-inch wrist. But if you have a 6 to 7-inch wrist, this bracelet will fit you with no problems whatsoever. So as you can see on wrist, it's an incredibly aesthetically pleasing piece. I love the 47.3mm lug-to-lug measurement, which is close to the perfect lug-to-lug measurement of 48mm. The 21mm lug width really does balance the 39.5mm head of the piece very well. And I also like the use of AR coating. This is something I'm critical of with the Rolex Submariner dates, that it doesn't have AR coating on the underside of the flat sapphire crystal. Rolex do use AR coating on the underside of the Cyclops magnifier, but they don't use AR coating on the underside of the sapphire crystal itself. But it's a notable enhancement that the Oyster Perpetual has over the Submariner date, in that the underside of the sapphire crystal is fully coated with anti-reflective coating. And it does really help with reducing the glare and reflection on those applied indices and the baton hands. As you can see, it is performing well to reduce the glare and reflective properties of a flat sapphire crystal. Incredibly comfortable piece to wear due to being 137 grams, as I've discussed, and also because it's low profile at only 11.6mm, it will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you're going to wear business shirts. So I absolutely love the fit, the feel-good factor and the comfort. Very satisfying piece to wear in terms of comfort, and also a very good looking piece in terms of its looks. Now, with regards to the crown, it's a screw down solid stainless steel crown, as one would expect, made from oyster steel, which is 904L grade. It has the Rolex coronet embossed, and it provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters of water resistance, as does the solid oyster steel screw down case back. So 100 meters of water resistance from the screw down case back, and as one would expect, the finish of the underside of the case and the end links is done to perfection. The fit of the end links to the case is just sublime. It really is the very best of case finishing, and also the mirror polishing to the flanks of the case and the bezel are just done to a flawless standard. The luster of the 904L oyster steel is just beautiful to look at, as you can see when one moves the bracelet in the light. The luster of 904L is definitely superior to 316L grade stainless steel, which is the popular choice for other watch brands, and I absolutely love that luster of the 904L. It's one of my favourite aspects of the piece, and that also continues through to the clasp. As you can see, just a beautiful sheen to the grains of the 904L oyster steel. So with regards to the movements used, I'll talk you through it. Rolex developed the caliber 3235 and first used it in the Pearlmaster, and then it was subsequently used in many other Rolex pieces such as the Sea Dweller and also the Datejust, and now the Submariner Date. So when they developed the caliber 3235, which is the date complication version of this movement, the caliber 3230, they developed a new high-performance lubricant, and the purpose of that lubricant was to extend the service interval of Rolex movements from 5 years to 10 years respectively. So this caliber 3230's architecture is effectively the same as the caliber 3235. The only difference is the absence of the date complication, but the movement's design is exactly the same. So it benefits from a 70-hour power reserve, which is superior to the predecessor, the caliber 3130's 48-hour power reserve. It has 31 joules, hand winding and hacking, and it runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. Now you'll know from my previous reviews, I really like 4 Hz movements because they give a nice characteristic smooth sweep to the second hand, and as you can see, this caliber 3130 has that 4 Hz characteristic sweep. I really like the smooth sweeping of the second hand. Now, one of my favourite aspects of the caliber 3230 is the chronology escapement. So the chronology escapement is made from nickel phosphorus, and the main property of nickel phosphorus is that it is insensitive to magnetic fields. So this is a highly anti-magnetic movement due to that nickel phosphorus chronology, and I also like that it's 15% more efficient. So the escapement in the chronology is the most impressive aspect of the movement overall, because Rolex has gained 15% efficiency just from the chronology alone. When Rolex designed the caliber 3235, they redesigned 90% of the parts used in its predecessor, the caliber 3135, and the purpose of doing that was to create a more efficient movement. So this caliber 3230 has nearly 50% more power reserve than its predecessor, the caliber 3130, which had 48 hours. And really, to gain power reserve from 48 hours to 70 hours is a very impressive enhancement. So the chronology, which is 15% more efficient, has helped them gain that extra 50% of power reserve, and I think that's very impressive. So it's also impressive to have a 10-year service interval, and really I'm very impressed with the movement's accuracy. This one is running consistently at plus 1 second per day. So it's a very accurate, very reliable, and also technically excellent movement. It's efficient, and also with a 10-year service interval, that is a notable enhancement. So let's do a lume test and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to its absolute maximum. So as usual, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch and charge it up to its absolute peak. Now I've got high expectations of the Rolex Chromolite. I was very impressed with the Chromolites used on my Submariner date. And when it comes to lume, I regard Swiss BGW9 Superluminova, Seiko Lumibright and Rolex Chromolite to be the best lume in the world. I really regard them to be very close in quality of performance. Right, so as you can see, it has not disappointed. This Rolex Chromolite is outstanding. This is the very best lume one can get. It's glowing incredibly brightly, and it's also continuing to glow for a good length of time. Now, the benefit of using the double applied indices at 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock, as you can see, is it even improves the legibility further. So those double indices really do help the orientation of the dial. And also the absence of the 12 o'clock index on the dial with the placement of the applied Rolex coronet really does also add to the orientation. One can clearly see where the 12 o'clock index is because it's absent from the dial. I also like the fact there's plenty of lume on the baton hands, and it really does make it a very legible dial to read, and I think that they've done a fantastic job. I think the applied indices are large, they have good lume plots, and there's plenty of chrome light used on all the indices and the baton hands. So 10 out of 10 performance, and this is something I really like about Rolex. And when one owns mid-tier pieces or low-tier pieces, often the lume is an aspect which is disappointing. And then when one purchases a high-tier piece such as a Rolex, the use of chromolites is immediately apparent that it is a notable enhancement. It's a case of one is getting what one pays for. So lastly, I'll surmise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the respective price point of this piece from a Rolex authorised dealer is €5,600. Yes, I consider it to be excellent quality, and yes, I consider it to be excellent value. Really, to get a piece with a 70-hour power reserve and a 10-year service interval with a 5-year international warranty is outstanding value. The performance of the watch is absolutely incredible. I like everything about it. 100 meters of water resistance. It now has AR coating on the underside of the sapphire crystal, which was a criticism I had of previous Rolex pieces. And really, the only room for improvement would be the addition of 2 extra links to fit larger wrists, and also I think the piece could be further enhanced if they upgraded the clasp to a glide lock clasp, but however, these are minor criticisms. The clasp is perfectly acceptable, and I actually prefer the engraved recessed coronet to the embossed coronets used on flip lock and glide lock clasps, as I've discussed. So overall, it is an incredibly well executed piece, and I really like it. I think that this is just the perfect watch for my needs. So this is the reason why I decided to scale down my collection to just this one piece, and this is the only watch I have, and I wear it on a daily basis, and I'm thoroughly satisfied with it. I think this is one of the greatest Rolex watches ever made, and I think the simplicity and the legibility of the dial makes it an iconic, highly collectible purist Rolex piece. So I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for champagne money. So I hope you've liked my review of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 41. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.